A story I heard from an officer during my military service. One day during the early days of his military training, a news arrived that the bus his mother was taking on the way to visit him rolled over and that she died. He was granted an emergency leave and rushed to the hospital totally out of mind. But upon arrival, he found his mom was still alive. Indeed injured and bedridden in the hospital, but she was fine enough to be able to talk. He of course asked what had happened, and his mother recounted what she had experienced. On the way to her son's military base, she dozed off in the bus. When she woke up, she found herself in a strange place. Weather was summery hot, and sun was shining bright with occasional breeze cooling her off. In front of her was a vast field of reed. It was so beautiful she almost forgot herself. Only when she reminded herself that her son should be waiting for her visit, she snapped out and started to look for a way out. The field of reed was seemingly endless, and the sun started to set. After a long wandering, she found a small cottage from afar. It was very shabby, but there was a dim light and smoke billowing out from its chimney. When she reached the house, there was a crooked old lady. Mother asked her the way out, but the old woman barely gave one look at her and totally ignored. Mother didn't give up, but kept asking for help, and suddenly the old woman picked up a broomstick and started beating the mother.
"Move away, dumb woman! Damn you!"
The mother, now desperate, clung on the old woman's sleeves and begged to tell her the way out, that her son was waiting. In the end, the old woman seemed exhausted. She dropped down on the ground and mumbled,
"To that direction. About an hour away is a road. There stops the bus that comes once a day. Catch that, you can go home. But miss that, you are stuck here forever."
Mother jumped up and followed the direction. Even after reaching the road, she hung around for about 3 hours waiting for the bus. It was already deep in the night and not a single light was around. Suddenly a light shone at the end of the road. Believing it to be the bus, she sprinted like mad. The bus driver smiled upon seeing her and said, "You're lucky. I was about to set off." Then he added as she jumped on the bus, "Never look back even if you hear somebody calling after you during the ride, no matter what." Indeed, after the bus started, voices were calling out, begging and swearing that she shouldn't go. Mother covered her ears and closed her eyes, following the driver's advice. Then she suddenly felt the bus running into the bright light, and she woke up to find herself in the hospital. Actually, the doctors had already covered her face with a sheet, having declared her dead, and she screamed back to life from the dead. Maybe it was her love for her son that brought her back from the underworld. When I was little, I was very sickly and used to spend at least 1/3 of a year in the hospital. Family members and relatives occasionally paid a visit to my hospital bed, which was always a welcome news to my boring hospital life, except when my grandma visited. I was scared of my grandma. In her late 70s, she was still tough as anything and swore like a seaman. Her fearful reputation had only grew after grandfather passed. she'd always say, looking at me lying on the hospital bed, "What's the use of a man so sickly? Take those balls off, you don't deserve it." Or, "How much longer are you going to lying around, eh? You're just wasting all those pills and drips and whatnot." Or, "Your dad wasn't so weak. Who'd see to have it taken to turn out a wimp?" Her every sentence was enough to make me teary, and all the other family members had to sweat to diffuse the situation. I sometimes even hid away somewhere when Grandma came until she had to leave for her bus schedule. My parents would scold me for that, but I couldn't help it for the fear of my grandma. My condition got worse over time, but doctors could not pinpoint what exactly was the issue with me. By the time I turned to 11, I would suffer daily vomit and constantly fall down as if somebody pushed me, and ended up on a pushchair. I lost all my appetite and energy and slept most of the day through. Hospital treatment were doing little for me, and I was discharged. My desperate parents in the end called in a shaman. Grandma's reaction was, "What the fuss is this all about? Bringing the noisy bitch in?" But the shaman was not fazed at all and looked about the house around with her sharp eyes. "This house is haunted with an evil. It stuck to that boy when he was born in this house to possess his soul. It's too late now. The evil is too strong to do anything against," shaman said. It was a shocking revelation. The shaman declared that I had months to live before she turned back and went. My parents collapsed on the spot, while my grandma shouted swears at the back of the shaman. Then, a few days later, my grandma passed away. That tough woman with the spirit of a burly man suddenly died. Everybody could not believe it. Grandma lived by herself since Grandpa died, and that morning my uncle, who lived nearby, paid a good morning visit, only to find her dead in her sleep. After a funeral, I had a dream. I saw Grandma's grave opening up. She walked out of it with an axe in her hand. She marched without hesitation towards my family home. Her face seemed so enraged that it looked like a devil himself. I woke up as scared as ever. A few days later, I had another dream. Grandma in a shroud was standing in front of a house with an axe. My house. I thought she must have come from dead to get me. She came over to me and started striking axe at me. I woke up startled. And then, since that dream, I started to regain energy, which was the beginning of the miraculous recovery. I could hardly swallow thin gruel yesterday, and suddenly I asked to have meat and rice today. My parents were elated and said that late Grandma must have done something for me, but I didn't believe a word of it. But when the shaman was brought in again to re-examine the situation, what she explained surprised us all. "Your granny is an amazing person. She saved you in her death." She was the only shaman in town, and my grandma, shortly before she passed, came to visit the shaman and asked to bring her an axe should she die. Shaman could not understand what Grandma was on about, but Grandma insisted, handing over a bunch of money. So when Grandma passed, the shaman indeed brought an axe over to her grave and offered it with a little ceremony. "You're a truly lucky boy. Your granny drove the evil spirit off of you. Live a healthy life now. And here, I return the money your granny gave me," shaman said. Wrinkled bunch of dirty banknotes, which Grandma must have saved over the years, mounted to 760,000 won. I still can't believe my grandma, who had never said a single warm word to me, turned out to be my savior. My family is a bit all over the place when it comes to religion. My dad is from Catholic background, mom is a Buddhist, my sister is Protestant, and I'm a skeptic myself. One day I asked mom out of passing curiosity how she came around to believe in Buddhism. Her answer was much more amusing than anything I had anticipated. My mom grew up in a tiny country village. As usually the case is with such a village, most inhabitants were consisted with the elderly. Mom's neighbor was one such old lady who was left alone after her husband passed. Her only company was a dog that she called Sundung, referring to the dog's gentle nature. The dog was practically her son. Old lady would feed the dog before she ate, and indeed they loved each other very much. Sadly, Sundung died at the ripe age of 14. The old lady was devastated, lost appetite and all a while. Thankfully, a good news arrived. That old lady's elder son, who lived out in a bigger town, was expecting a son as his third child. Coming from the patriarchal generation, that was indeed a welcome news after only 2 granddaughters, which perked her up. She eagerly waited for the arrival of the grandson. When the grandma and grandson finally got to meet, it was obvious the baby took liking of his grandmother instantly. His crying would instantly turn into a smile in grandma's presence. The old lady, of course, fell in love with him. When the boy turned about 4, Grandma asked him for fun, "Why do you like Grandma so much?" The boy's answer was anything beyond what she expected. "Because you took so good care of me before I died. Called me Sundung, cuddled me, and spoiled me, didn't you? So I love you, Grandma." Old lady was surprised and probed further what he meant, and the boy said, "You were so sad when I died. I was too, so I came back to make you happy again." Apparently, this story converted my mom to Buddhism and made her believe in reincarnation. It's a story a work colleague had told me. He has a twin brother. Their mother had passed away when they were young. The household of 3 guys, including his dad, was dry and quiet. Each would withdraw in their own rooms every evening. One day he had a dream. There was his mom. She prepared dinner as she used to when she was alive. He wanted to cry, but got a hold of himself and ate the meal graciously. He was afraid she would be gone again when the dinner was finished, so he willfully ate slowly. Despite all the effort, Mother came up to him and said, "I have to go now. Be a good son to your father, and be good to your brother." He held her tight and finally bursted into cry. He begged her not to go. "Please stay, please, Mom." But all in vain. She disappeared. He woke up from the dream, but couldn't bear the bursting sadness by himself. So he ran to his brother's room to find him sitting up on his bed with his face wet with tears. No further words were necessary. They cried together for a long time in each other's arms. In Korea, there are occasionally some people who brag about him being the descendant of a grand family line. One of my friends was such a case. It's usually a bluff without substance, but in his case, well, anybody who visited his grandfather's place would realize it wasn't just a white lie. The grand mansion was more akin to what I saw at folk villages. Layers of walls that separated sections of women's quarter, men's quarter, service quarter, several large storages. Traces of lives over generations were all contained in the elegant wooden structures. I used to spend at least a week of summer vacation there. Not that there was anything particularly exciting in the countryside, but in that house, I could just spend the whole day watching the raindrops falling off from the tip of the elegantly curved tiled roof. But anyway, this story is not about me, but what my friend's mother has experienced as a newlywed. My friend's parents had to live as a weekend couple for the first 3 months. They'd been searching for a suitable place for their honeymoon home long before the wedding, but the one place they really liked still needed 3 months before it was available. So for those 3 months, the groom stayed on in his old lodging near his work, while the bride stayed by the in-laws in that grand old house. The household was much shrunk, and by then there lived just her parents-in-law, younger brother-in-law who was still single, and a middle-aged woman who helped with house chores. There wasn't really any hard works for her, nothing like the dramatic stories about in-laws from hell forcing her to wash clothes in the freezing water, etc. Now that wasn't entirely unheard of in a generation. The only thing was she had to wake up earlier than what she was used to, as her parents-in-law, being the country folks, would rise at the crack of dawn. Usually she had no problem, but occasionally she could not shake off the temptation to snooze just 5 minutes more, just another 5 minutes more. That morning she closed her eyes again, saying just 5 minutes more to herself. Then she woke up for somebody calling out, "Madam?" She checked the clock to find exactly 5 minutes past. She just thought the voice was dream manifesting her sense of vigilant living with in-laws. A few days later, she woke up once again with somebody calling out, "Madam?" She opened her eyes, startled, to find she had overslept a good 20 minutes than she should have. She must have stopped the alarm in her sleep too. Without the voice, she would have slept through the morning. But whose voice was it? She looked around and outside, but could find nobody. And by the way, who addressed one with "Madam" nowadays? Confused, she asked the lady who helped with the chore, but she just brushed it off as her being too sensitive living in yet strange place. But Friend's mother wasn't convinced. While she was grateful for the gentle voice helping her to get up on time, but it was nonetheless spooky. But she dared not to ask her in-laws either. One weekend, rather than husband coming home, she was to join him in Seoul. There were a few things to decide about decorating the honeymoon home to be, and it was also a chance to visit her parents. The night before the weekend trip, she was somewhat excited that she could not sleep until the early hours. After all, it was the first outing in 2 months since her moving into the in-laws. Then she woke up with feeling something fumbling with her duvet. The room looked just the same as usual in the dim blue light of the early dawn. She was about to close her eyes again when she heard something making bustling noise from the foot of the duvet. She was now wide awake. While she wasn't sure what to do, she felt this time slight move at the corner of her duvet just a few centimeters away from her shoulder. She pretended still in sleep and peeked where she felt the movement. She could clearly see dimples on the duvet as if some fingers pressed on them. Old-fashioned duvet was filled with an inch-thick cotton wool and would leave marks if pressed with a hand. Now that hand prints moved along the edge of the duvet and stopped just a few centimeters below her face. She was just frozen and could not even make a noise all the while. Back in Seoul, she first visited her parents. While talking about the life with in-laws, she also made a passing comment about a strange voice calling her madam. Her aunt then half-jokingly said if she should seek a shaman or something. For the first time in her life, she thought about it seriously. Till then, seeking a shaman was just some superstitious old lady's business to her. But soon she forgot about it all as her husband joined in and spent a busy day selecting wallpapers and shopping the new household goods. Came the Monday morning and she was about to start her return trip when her mother held her back that there was some last important business. Apparently her mother brought her to a Buddhistic temple. Her mother was a devout Buddhist and chose the temple over a shaman. Fortune-telling or shamanism is not anyway in line with Buddhism, but there are occasionally some monks with particular spiritual sensitivity, and her mother brought her to one such one. Neither her mother nor she really mentioned anything about the mystery voice and just chatted about mundane subjects with a monk for over an hour. Then, as if it was mere a passing comment, the monk said to her, "Your life should be easy at the in-laws, as she's still looking after her madam day and night." My friend's mother was shocked that he picked exactly that word, madam. The monk finally started to explain the details, which surprised both her and her mother. The monk first described the grand house of her in-laws as if he'd been there already. And then he consoled her that it was a well-meaning poor spirit that wanted to help her and nothing to be scared of, and said that she should try and help her to pass on to the heaven now. He further explained it was a common practice a few generations back that a young bride of a high-born brought her own maid as she moved into the in-laws. The spirit was one such maid to one of the women who married into her in-laws' family long time ago. Not much older herself than her madame, and just in the same shoes of leaving her family and old life behind, she had faithfully served her mistress. But for whatever reason, had died young before her mistress. For the sense of guilt not fulfilling her duty and for worries about the mistress left behind, her spirit could not move on and was still hanging around the house. And when my friend's mother came to live there, the young bride must have looked like her mistress to this spirit all those years ago, and she started to serve her now. But it was time to help the poor kind soul to move on. There must be a relic that worked as an anchor to keep her there, and friend's mother should find that first, said the monk. Easier said than done. How was she to find the relic in the house where everything was the relics of generations upon generations? So she came back to the in-laws with a seemingly impossible task. From the day on, she discreetly started the treasure hunt around the house, checking in the old cabinets and boxes room by room. A part of her wanted just ignore the whole thing when the spirit was a kind one anyway. But thinking of this maid's life, leaving her own family behind to come here as a sort of dowry, and still trying to fulfill her duty to this day, she felt so sorry for her and once again carried on with her search. One day she checked in one of the storage rooms, which stored various screens, tables, vessels for memorial rituals. It wasn't just a storage, but more like a neatly arranged museum exhibition of the family's history. As she looked around, a big rice cabinet at the corner came to her eyes. With a household shrunken, they didn't need such a large rice storage anymore, and it served more as a pedestal to put other things on. She checked around and things on the cabinet, but nothing popped out as the potential relic of the dead maid. That night, she had a dream in which she saw herself walking towards the storage room and towards the rice cabinet at the corner. Not a dramatic dream, but it was enough to bring her back for a further inspection. This time, she moved all the objects on the cabinet and opened the top. She found some charcoals wrapped in newspapers, and various silk threads and embroidery rings, and a small wooden box with a handle. She was drawn to it. She sat on the spot to open the box. Neatly inlined with paper, it was obviously a sewing box. It contained a thimble made with layers of colorful fabrics, rusty small scissors, little wooden bobbins, and a pin cushion still holding some needles on it. Interesting, but she could not tell how exactly all the box and the contents were, so she took it to her father-in-law to ask about it. He remembered it had been used already by his grandmother, and could have been already an heirloom by then. As no women in the family had interest in embroidery anymore, he had collected all the embroidery tools and stored it in the rice cabinet. Now she learned it could be old enough to have a relation to the dead maid, but the box and everything in it were all too dainty and elegant to have been used by the maid. The whole thing must have rather belonged to the lady of the house. But a hunch guided her hand to the pincushion. Despite of herself, she held it in her hand and started to pull the seams apart till it torn open a little. Inside was a bunch of black hair as its filling. Nowadays needles are made with stainless steel, but in the old days they could get rusty very easily. So people used to rub it on the hair to coat it with a natural hair grease before storing, and in the same vein of idea, occasionally filled pincushions with hair too. Of course she could never be sure whose hair that really was, but her mind was set, and burned the pincushion with a prayer for the maid's peaceful rest at last. Did it work? Well, All she could say was she didn't hear the gentle voice calling, "Madam," again. I am the first granddaughter for both my mom's and dad's families, so I received really a lot of presents from relatives, especially dolls and stuffed animals, because I'm a girl. My mom used to put them along the bookshelves in the library room, on the higher shelves which I could not reach. She would bring them down when I asked. One day, when I was probably 4 or 5, I must have talked back to Mom one time too much, and she left me in the library room alone, telling me that I couldn't come out until I realized what I did wrong. For some reason, I felt something was off in that room that day, and I was taking a good look around the room when a clown doll which was sitting on the bookshelf along with other dolls suddenly spoke to me in a terrifying voice.
"You locked me up in here, bored to death. I'm gonna kill ya."
I fell on my bum and crawled to the door. Then the rest of the stuffed dolls and animals chimed in that they were going to kill me too. They closed on me, their terrifying chanting getting louder and louder. Despite my desperate effort, the door would not open, and I was too terrified even to scream. Suddenly, the pirate doll jumped between me and the other dolls. It shouted what they were thinking they were doing and started fighting against them. And at that point, I must have fainted. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Mom came to check on me because I was too quiet for too long, and found me on the floor, convulsing. And the clown and other dolls were scattered around, while the pirate doll sitting next to me. Mom wondered how I could bring down all of them from the higher shelves, but I didn't know what to answer. Needless to say, I threw away all the dolls, except for the pirate. It kept my side until it turned to rags. When I was a baby, I was sent to my granny and grew up under her till I reached school age. Her village was tucked away in the mountain region right up to DMZ. Military base was the main feature in that small town, and many parts of forest were forbidden to enter because of landmines for that reason. In the neighbourhood, I was the only kid apart from 3 brothers and sister next door. It was one day when I must have been 2 or 3. Granny was working in the field and I was playing alone in the yard. I saw a tiny little snake under the chestnut tree. I had no fear of wild animals, be it a deer in the mountain or hedgehog in the field. So I guess I tried to play with the snake too, as if it were some pet dog. But of course, a snake wouldn't respond to my call. Kids' innocence can sometimes surprisingly quickly translate into cruelty. Annoyed with the snake's non-response, I smashed its head with a stone and killed it. And from that instant, for some time, I killed snakes whenever I happened to run into one. I guess I found it some sort of game. Around the time I started suffering sleep paralysis and numbness in my limbs at night. It wasn't that I saw anything weird during the paralysis, but I would feel the sensation of falling down and then find myself could not move and my right leg going numb. All my desperate effort to wake up and shout was in vain. It was my granny who came to rescue. She would wake me up and massage my arms and legs with her rough, earthy hands till I fell asleep again. I moved back to my parents at 7 to attend primary school in the bigger town. Now, away from Granny, I still suffered sleep paralysis and numbness. I would wake up in the middle of the night and nagged my older sister to give me a massage. But sister wouldn't do such a thing, of course. My parents got worried for my nightly suffering, and in the end, my granny came to care for me. Granny was tough and free-spirited, fittingly so as a girl born in the year of tiger. I could see her unhappiness being stuck in the big town away from nature. Nevertheless, she would massage my arms and legs almost every night, talking about her life back in the country village, farming field, or stories from all the way back during Korean War, till I fell asleep again. And that way, Granny stayed with me till I became middle school student. And just like that, she passed away one day. She had a car accident and was hospitalized for an operation, but never woke up from anesthesia. I never thought she'd be gone like that, and missed those last few days to visit her in the hospital. When my teacher passed on the news of her passing during the class, I ran all the way back home in my slippers, desperately hoping that it was a lie, a dream. Adult members of the family kept me away from Granny's funeral and burial, saying that I was her favorite and she might try to take me with her had I been around. What a load of BS. And just like that, Granny disappeared from my life. I was lost for a while. I neglected studying and didn't mingle with other mates at school. All the while, sleep paralysis and numbness continued, even when I snoozed at school. I could not sleep in bed I used to share with Granny, so I would sleep on the floor. And then during paralysis, I would see yellow eyes staring at me in the dark underneath the bed. Then they would multiply to 4, 8, 16. One day, I strangely felt like going to bed early against my usual self. And for some reason that day, the floor felt too hard to sleep on. So I moved up to bed for the first time since Granny passed away. In sleep, I felt my body going paralyzed as always. With that, yellow lights floated all around me. I had no energy to fight it anymore and I just resigned. Then I felt warm, rough hands massaging my arms. I instinctively called out, "Gran?" "Shh, it's all right, my baby. Go back to sleep." It was Granny's voice, and just like old days, she talked about things she grew on the field and what happened during Korean War. In that so familiar moment, I suddenly remembered something and said, "Gran, you see, when I was young, I found a snake under the chestnut tree, and I..." "Shh, I know, dear. I know," said Granny, never stopping her massage on my legs. When I woke up next morning, Granny wasn't there. I cried for a long time. How much I missed her. Since that day, my sleep paralysis and numbness were gone, and didn't see Granny again in dreams either. My only regret is that I should have opened my eyes and looked at her one more time that night. I lived in a small town when I was little. It was well before the time of computers and internet, so kids like me spent days playing and running out and about. One of our perennial favorite was hide and seek. As if for that purpose, my family home had an unusually large cellar. Maybe it's just from the kids' perspective, but the dark, dingy, maze-like cellar felt bigger than the humble bungalow above it. The old landlord told us the cellar was indeed very old, so I suspect the house was rebuilt in the later time above the original foundation, which was the cellar. One day we were playing hide and seek again. I looked for a perfect hiding spot in the cellar and found a little enclave of a space I wasn't familiar with, which was in itself already odd. However huge the cellar was, it wasn't possible that there was a corner left I hadn't yet checked out. There were strange boxes stacked up, and on the floor were scattered torn pieces of a handbook clothing and papers. When I looked up, on the wall was scribbled, "Long live Korean independence," with what looked like blood. And next to it was hung a national flag. When I wasn't sure if it were all real or a dream anymore, I think I fainted. And then I saw a dreamlike sequence of scenes. It was still in the same cellar. A group of guys were discussing something together, when suddenly loud noises of footsteps and shouts were heard from the above. The guys were instantly alarmed and stirred, but soon bade good lucks and goodbyes to each other. One of them bit his finger and scribbled "Long live Korean independence" with his blood, and joined the others running out of the cellar with a grave face. As the vision faded out, I heard further shouts and gunfires from the above. When I woke up, I was in my room, and my mom was keeping my side. Her face looked more sad than worried. When friends couldn't find me, they alarmed Mom, and she found and brought me back from the cellar. Later she further told me, while I passed out, I kept talking in my sleep, "Long live Korean independence," and so on. It brought back the memory of how her father died, and so she looked so sad when I woke up. Her father, my grandfather, was an independence resistance during Japanese occupation. Maybe because I was young then, nobody told me how he died, that he was captured and tortured to death by the Japanese authority just 6 days before Japan's declaration of surrender to the Allies. Could it be, however unlikely, that I was transported back in time and witnessed the last moment of my grandfather and his fellow resistance? Seeing how my grandma cried when I told her what I saw in the dream, I believe it was, or at least I want to believe so. I had a friend in my middle school. She was a troubled child who'd put on a heavy makeup and run away from school with other boys. But other than that, she neither made other notable troubles or bullied other classmates. I was, and still am, a bit of a nerd, and first got to talk to her over the topics like games and cartoons, and we became friends. But as we entered different high schools, and it was long before the time of mobile phones and messengers, we quickly lost contact afterwards. About 2 years later, I got to hear she died. She drove a car with no license and crushed, killing herself and her 2 friends on the spot. I knew all 3 from the middle school and was shocked and saddened by the news. A few years passed, and one day I was taking a nap at home, and in the dream, my friend and the other 2 girls killed in the car accident barged into my place.
"A car is waiting for you downstairs. Hurry,"
said my friend. I didn't ask what for or where we were going, but just apologized and hurried myself down. In the car were the tall girl in the driver's, my friend on the passenger seat, and I sat myself next to the 3rd girl in the back seat. I wasn't feeling any way odd or awkward, as I knew them all after all. The car took off and ran straight through the empty street, devoid of any other cars or passerbys, until we were stopped by a barricade. A man in black with a loudspeaker instructed the other 3 girls to come out of the car. He rounded them up to the side of the road and seemed talking to them. But suddenly he sprinted over to me in the car and shouted, "Get out! Run away! Quickly!" My body reacted before I could think. I just ran as I was told, I don't know how long, but until I saw a rest area. I hid myself in the public toilet and saw in the mirror a different face than my own looking back. And there I woke up with a startle. The dream left me in a strange mood for a long time. It was so vivid and real that it felt even more troubling. Where were they trying to take me to, and what might have happened had I not run away? And the guy who told me to run away? I knew I had met him before, but could not pinpoint who and how. Some friends, when I told them about the dream, said he might be my ancestor or a guardian angel, but he felt more like a person I had known personally, somebody once so important to me, but erased from my memory. About a year after the dream, I had yet another dream in my nap. A woman with jet black hair and eyes, and in dress that looked like that of a late Victorian style, appeared and attacked me with a huge knife. Funny thing was, the moment I saw her, I knew that she was the wife of the mystery man in my previous dream, and that I had done something that deserved this attack. Regardless, my fright mode kicked in, and I ran away into the dark forest until I fell. I helped myself getting up by holding on to what felt like a stone plaque. When I looked at it, I realized it was a tombstone. My tombstone. Next moment, I was stabbed by the woman who caught up with me, and I once again realized that this was how I had died. As I died, facing the woman's shouting of curses, all I could feel was how I missed the man. A few years passed, and I had another dream. I was standing by myself at a river bank. I was waiting for the man. Then I saw a group of people approaching, led by a boy. The boy came up to me and told me they were all heading to their hometown, but the journey would take a long time, longer than I could ever imagine. I didn't know what to respond to that, but the boy then added,
"He cannot come today. He desperately wanted, but cannot. He asked me to tell you that he was so sorry, and he will try to make it next time."
I woke up with a huge sense of despondency. Another few years, and yet another dream. This time I was sitting in a tea room at a train station. The setting looked like late 19th century Europe. The tea room was packed with people, but as I looked out of the window, there was not a sign of train nor any people waiting on the platform. I knew I was once again waiting for him. But he didn't come after a long time. Then an old gentleman entered the tea room and walked straight up to me.
"He can't come today. He told me to pass on his apologies to you."
I just bursted into tears there. I woke up with a strange mixture of sadness and bitterness, constantly being stood up by a man I don't even remember. And yet after another few years, I had this dream. I was walking through a forest, shining blindingly a fresh green. At the end of it was a glassy lake and a greenhouse full of exquisite flowers. And in the greenhouse was a man. I knew instantly. It was the man I'd been waiting and looking for through the eternity, the love of my destiny whom I had never really forgot. I ran into his arms, all in tears. He didn't say anything, but I could just feel how sorry he was. We fell on the grass, wrapped in each other's arms. I couldn't take my eyes and hands off of him and his face. How could I have ever forgot who he was? How could I ever forgot this face? I could not forgive myself and repeated to myself that I should never ever forget him again. But time came to part again. It was closer to terror rather than sadness that grabbed me. I shook all over with fear. How could I live on without him? I could only because I had forgot him, but now that the memory was back, I had no courage to go on again. I hung onto his arms and grabbed his face like a mad woman just to feel him one more time, one more second. In my desperation, I came up with an idea. Should I at least learn what his name was? Wouldn't I be able to find him again when I wake up from this dream? I asked him to tell me his name, and he opened his mouth for the first time since our reunion. But in the language I've never heard of. It was so unearthly a sound that it felt more like that of an alien. Before I could react, I woke up from the dream. I bewailed, feeling like my guts slashed into pieces. I could tell that was the last time. I would never see him again. After such a long time of waiting and searching for each other, that was it. I think I was consumed in tremendous sense of loss for a good while afterwards. Before that last dream, I vaguely expected if he be the man of my destiny, I should one day meet him again, whether it be in this life or after, and finally stay happily together. But no, the last dream made it clear to me there wouldn't be the happily ever after ending for me and him. The last dream is already 8 years ago. And just as I expected, he has never returned to my dream again. This is a story a teacher from my primary school once recounted during the class. He was all around stern but good-hearted teacher, and kids loved him, and especially little stories he dropped when kids lost concentration during a class. This is one of such. When he was young, he spent most of his summer and winter vacations at his grandparents' in the countryside. He'd usually roam around in the nature with other kids like little puppies, but that day he happened to walk around the village by himself and ended in the part of the village he wasn't familiar with. He was passing by a house and over the low fence saw a young woman sitting on the veranda. She was very pretty. To quote what the teacher told us, she was the prettiest woman he'd ever seen. Yet a little boy, but still a man he was, and he stared at her despite of himself. Young woman smiled back to his blunt stare. Encouraged by her smile, he greeted, "Hello," and the woman replied, "Hi," in friendly manner. "Are you new in the neighbourhood?" she said. "No, I'm just visiting my grandpa here," he said. A moment of silence followed, but wanting to continue the interaction a bit longer, he asked, "And what are you doing now?" Indeed, most adults in such farming village would be out working in the field during the day, and it was a bit curious she should be just idling around like that. "I'm waiting for my husband," she said with a smile. He was surprised to find this girly-looking woman was a married lady. "Your husband?" He should be back any minute." Her face bloomed with another smile, clearly very happy to see her man. Struck by her beauty once again, but having nothing more to say, he bade goodbye to her and moved on. Back at grandparents', he excitedly talked about the encounter with this beautiful woman at the dinner table. His cousin asked where he saw her, and he explained where her house was. But the reaction from the family was not what he expected. Oh dear, the boy was lured by the ghost!" shouted his aunt. Uncle and Grandpa hushed her, but sternly told him that he shouldn't get around carelessly. My teacher could not understand. That pretty lady could not be a ghost, surely. There was nothing untidy or pale about her, nor she showed any malintention towards him. Nevertheless, his uncle was so alarmed that he took my teacher back to the young woman's house. It was definitely the same house he passed by the day before, except it looked much older and abandoned now. Uncle then explained that there used to live a young couple. Sadly, the husband disappeared in the mountain one winter, and his young wife desperately waited his return, but died of scarlet fever before she could learn about her husband's fate. The husband was found in the gorge following spring, already half eaten away by wild animals. The talk about her fresh apparition got around the village, and it prompted the villagers to invite a Buddhist monk to the house to pray for her lingering soul. My teacher was present at the occasion himself. He couldn't understand the monk's chant, but when he said out loud at the end, tears poured out despite of himself.
Your marriage cut short in this life, but move on, dear lady, and meet him again in the next life for a long, happy life.
How much loved and missed she must have of her husband. Because she looked so real and lively, my teacher felt so much sadder for her and prayed for the young couple's reunion in next life. A story my friend told me. She was raised by her grandmother in the countryside until she turned 5 because both of her parents were very busy with their business venture. Only for her education's sake, her parents took her back home in Seoul. Having been practically her mom, Grandma's love for her had never ceased even afterwards. Despite the distance and inconvenient journey, Grandma would never miss to visit her for her birthdays or such occasions with a bundle full of presents and snacks for her. But as her health started failing, she could not make the journey anymore, and citing the distance, my friend didn't visit her very often either. One night she had a dream about her granny passing away. She could not shake off the anxiety and visited Grandma the next day. Her granny was, of course, very happy to see her and insisted that she should cook dinner for her. My friend was out to catch some sweetwater shells for doenjang soup, fermented bean paste soup, in the stream in front of the house, and saw Grandma coming out to the big pots on the courtyard to take some doenjang out. Then, my friend froze up seeing something else. Not far from the pots was a bush of grass, and behind it was a man in black with a pale face, staring at Grandma. He was much tall and sent off clear vibe that wasn't of an ordinary human. Too overwhelmed to do anything, my friend just stood there dripping tears. Only when Grandma called her, she could move again. But despite the enormous sense of foreboding, she could mention neither her dream nor the Grim Reaper-like man she just saw. That night, she insisted to sleep next to Grandma. She listened out for any sound from outside, constantly checking Grandma's breathing and her condition. She thought she shouldn't fall asleep, but for some reason she could not fight off the tremendous drowsiness. When she woke up, it was already bright and the air was full of scent of wet grass. She pulled the duvet up, feeling a bit cold, then sat up with a sense of chills. Next to her was Grandma, in the exact same position she fell asleep the previous night. My friend bursted into tears, holding her cold body. My friend said she was scared of both the dream and the sighting of the Grim Reaper at the time, but by now she is rather grateful that they gave her a chance to see her dear Grandma one last time. A friend told me this story after several bottles between us. I'll call him Chong-woo here for the sake of the story. We first met in the uni. The first impression of his calm demeanor behind his thick glasses was that he was just an ordinary boy from a well-to-do family. It took quite some time till I finally realized that his life wasn't really that ordinary. His mom passed away when he was little. He was told it was an unfortunate accident, but he later overheard adults talking among themselves that she made a last call to ask to take care of Chong-woo, that she suffered depression, and it all started with his dad's infidelity. His dad wasn't much more than a stranger to Chong-woo. He hardly ever talked to his son apart from leaving some pocket money on the breakfast table. He went through numerous girlfriends after Chong-woo's mom died. And one day, when Chong-woo turned 10, Dad introduced a glamorous woman as his new mom. Soon the new mom moved in with her daughter, who was 4 years older than Chong-woo and was just as glamorous as her mom. The new mom was hysterical. She watched Chong-woo's every move with hawk's eyes. If he got bad results from school tests, she yelled at him loud enough for all the neighbors to hear. And if he came back home later than usual, she would interrogate him if he didn't do anything funny. She checked on his phone and flipped through his diary. The only one the new mom couldn't touch was her own daughter. Her face under the bleached yellow hair had thick makeup on, always smelt of cigarette, and her school uniform was tailored back to skin-tight miniskirt. When her mom screamed at her, she stared right back and spit it out at her. "Crazy bitch!" Her mom would of course go mad, but she would just lock up her room door and turned up the volume of her stereo to max, drowning her mom's scream and swears. And invariably it was the mother who would get tired and withdraw after an hour or two. While her mom was a crazy bitch, Chong-woo was an idiot to her. Also, she chewed out at him occasionally when their eyes met. They didn't talk to each other much, but sometimes when both parents were out, she took Chong-woo to a fast food restaurant. The new mom hated junk food, so it was the first time for Chong-woo to have a taste of such food. Watching him gobbling down a hamburger, she as again called him idiot. For Chong-woo, there was somehow the clearest memory of his stepsister, sitting across the cheap plastic table of the fast food restaurant and ticking her long nails together as her usual habit. His stepsister died of motorbike accident when she was 17. Since then on, Chong-woo occasionally got sleep paralysis. Nothing dramatic. He would open his eyes in the middle of the night and find himself paralyzed, and then he could smell a whiff of cigarette and ticking noise, and then would fall back to sleep. Chong-woo attributed it to experiencing the death of his stepsister at sensitive teenage years. As soon as he got a place in uni, he moved away from home. He ignored all the calls and contacts from his parents and tried to become fully independent. He got a girlfriend too, a fellow uni student named Suhi, pretty and friendly and popular among colleagues. And around the time, the context of his sleep paralysis changed. One day he once again opened his eyes in the middle of the night, followed by the usual cigarette smoke. But what followed was new. Something whispered in his ears. He could hear it saying the name of his girlfriend, Suhi, clearly. And then all sorts of obscene and even sexually degrading swears about her. The whispering voice gave off sneering giggle all the time. With that change, it also came more and more frequently. What used to be barely once a month event became now 3-4 nights a week and left Chong-woo tired and disturbed. One day he confided it to a senior student, and he, to Chong-woo's surprise, took him straight to a shaman, who turned out to be the senior student's aunt. Chong-woo half-heartedly talked about his sleep paralysis, and the shaman's response was, "Well, there is something around you. Not particularly good, but not exactly malicious either." Such neither this nor that kind of answer didn't help him at all. Sleep paralysis continued regardless, and Chong-woo could not believe whatever there was not malicious when he carried on calling his sweet girlfriend in all sorts of despicable names. In the end, he broke up with Suhi not long after. On one hand, he felt somewhat guilty to face her when he could just helplessly listen to all the smears on her every night, and at the same time, he was so tired that he just wanted to end it all as it all flared up with his relationship with her. And indeed, his sleep paralysis backed down to the previous level. Just occasional whiff of smoke and ticking noise. Jung-woo could not help but wonder, though, was it really his stepsister's spirit, or some other naughty entity pretending to be her? If it were truly his sister, why should she disturb him so much with his relationship? And why now too, when nothing such had happened when he had other girlfriends previously in high school? A few years passed, and Jung-woo rented a room after finishing his military service. The location was good and was relatively cheap, but something wasn't quite right. Mold would creep up on the walls, and food would go off quickly even in the fridge, and occasionally he found long hair in the room, though he was the only one living there. He just thought it was damp and traces of a former tenant, until he started getting strange recurring nightmare. He would find himself on bed and then hear something busily running about. When he turned his head, he found it a woman with a long hair, running around on all fours. And then she would suddenly turn her head to look at him, and with that he would wake up with sweat. Problem was, every time he had a nightmare, the woman in the dream would get nearer to him. First to the bedroom door, and then into the room, and so on. He got scared and tried to sleep at his colleagues or in his club room at uni, but they were all but temporary solutions. When the woman finally got right up to his bed, he got desperate enough to seek the shaman he met a few years ago. But alas, she was away and could see him only in 3 days earliest. Jung-woo decided to avoid sleeping in his room for those 3 days. But when he went back to the room to pick up his textbooks and thought to relax a bit while charging his phone, he unwittingly dozed off. And without a miss, the woman on all fours appeared in his dream again. With loud steps, she jumped up on his bed and on him, and started to strangle him. He could finally see her face clearly, blue-skinned like a corpse, and yet her eyes were all bloodshot red, and her mouth was smiling ear to ear. Is that it? Am I going to die? Jung-woo thought. When suddenly, the woman was pulled backwards and off the bed. He smelled familiar whiff of smoke, and for the first time he also saw clearly a woman with hair bleached yellow. She was beating the woman with the long hair. Jung-woo had never seen anybody beating the other person so mercilessly and thoroughly. When the long-haired woman passed out completely, the yellow-haired one grabbed her by the hair and dragged her out of the room. Before disappearing, the yellow-haired woman looked back. It was exactly how Jung-woo remembered his late stepsister, as she sat across the table in the fast food restaurant. And she spit it out. "Idiot!" With that, Jung-woo woke up. He cried a while with strange sense of relief and sadness. When he visited the shaman the following day, she said as soon as he walked in, "See, I told you she didn't mean to harm." The horrible long-haired woman never appeared in Jung-woo's dream again, and he just got very occasional sleep paralysis with a whiff of smoke and ticking noise. Jung-woo says he still offers memorial ritual for his late stepsister, with hamburger and fries and all by himself. It's not traditionally proper, but she wouldn't mind, he says. Jung-woo says he's still not entirely sure if the spirit is really of his sister or something else pretending to be her. But I myself think it is indeed his stepsister. Jung-woo doesn't seem to know, but Soo-hee, his ex, was not the bubbly girl he thought she was. She was deep in some sort of cult and was notorious for squeezing every penny out of boys who fancied her before spitting them out dry. So, my friend lives with a ghost of his sister, who is not particularly good, but not exactly malicious either. My family had a pet dog. My aunt brought her to us as a puppy that barely weaned off. A mixed dog with a small body, round bright eyes, and full bush tail. Citing the tiny frame and big round eyes, Mom used to insist the dog must have a Chihuahua in her blood. But well, we didn't really care anyway. Bobo, as we named the dog, was so smart. It didn't take more than 2 months before she was potty trained and followed a simple command such as po. Bobo became easily our favorite, especially of Mom's. But when she turned 3, well, I can only say things just clicked in the bad way that night. Dad forgot to close the front door, and uncharacteristically, Bobo ran right outside. Our house was cul-de-sac and usually had very few cars ever passing in front of it. But right that moment, a delivery van was speeding through, hitting our dog. Time passed, and one night I had a dream of Bobo running in through the front door. I ran towards, barefooted, shouting, "Mom, Mom! Bobo is home! Come out, Mom!" Bobo played with me in my arms a while before she hopped outside again. I woke up while I was still calling for Mom to come out. The following morning, I told Mom about the dream. She seemed surprised and told me she too saw Bobo in her dream the previous night. Just like in my dream, Bobo ran in through the front door. Mom ran to meet her saying, "You came, Bobo! Did you miss Mom? Mom missed you too." Bobo then backflipped and changed into a woman dressed in a white morning dress. She then politely bowed to Mom and went away. We then realized it was exactly a year to date from the day we lost Bobo. Mom used to jokingly say that Bobo was so smart that she must have been a human in the previous life. Maybe Mom was right after all. After the military service, I worked part-time at a beer hall for a while. It was just 10 minutes walk from my home, so couldn't be better. One little issue of bang in the middle of the residential area was sometimes underage teens coming to drink feigning to be adults, the bolder ones among them even daring to show fake ID. One evening, a group of clearly underage-looking boys came to the beer hall. I asked for their ID and they had carefully scratched out their birth year, 1988 to 1986. But it couldn't fool me. I asked them to live, and they did, swearing at me under their breath. About an hour passed. I saw red and blue lights flashing from the outside. It was a police car. I sneaked out expecting something exciting, and well, it was that same group of kids taken into the police car. I found a part-timer from our neighboring beer hall watching the same scene, all nerves and anxious. I asked him what happened. Apparently the kids, after kicked out by me, tried their luck at the beer hall next door. And luck they had. They got away with their fake ID and shared 6 bottles of soju among 4 of them. Got drunk and bold, they loudly bragged about how they got away with their fake ID, they should come back there with their even younger girlfriends, and so on. The part-timer and the owner only then realized they sold alcohol to the underage kids, but under the current Youth Protection Act, they had a lot more to lose if the authority were to be involved. They just hoped the kids to shut up and go. But alas, a customer overheard what the kids were saying and reported it to the police. The part-timer guy sighed and worried about his employer that he'd been having enough trouble in hand already, even without such a blow. On the other hand, my employer praised me for having caught and kicked the kids out, and he gave me some extra payment. Our neighbor was definitely not as lucky. His bar was ordered to be closed down for 3 months for having sold alcohol to underage kids. My employer worried for his neighbor, that his father had just passed away recently and his mother was in hospital for stroke too. As his staff mentioned, he seemed to have had his hand already full. The neighboring bar kept closed all the while, and just the paper of executive order for closing was getting yellow on the rolled-down shutter. One day, while I was unpeeling onions in the kitchen, somebody called out from the floor. There was a middle-aged woman.
"Could I talk to your boss? I'd like to ask if he'd seen my husband recently. He's the owner of the bar next door."
Her voice was trembling, and her eyes were already wet. My boss came in not long after and recognized her.
"What is up? What are you doing here?" he asked. "My husband went out a week ago and is gone missing ever since. His phone is kept off too. I searched around and even went to his father's tomb, but can't find him. Might you have any idea?"
she said. Her teary eyes turned to full-blown crying now. When she calmed down a bit, my boss cautiously said, "He might be in his bar. Have you checked there yet?"
"What would he do in an empty bar?" she said.
"Well, it doesn't hurt to check since you are here anyway. Let's go together," my boss said. Meanwhile, I went back to my job in the kitchen, but not long after, the woman's shrill scream I could clearly hear even from there. I went out and saw my boss jumping in, and with a humid early summer air from outside, could I detect the whiff of disgusting smell, a mixture of sewer and rotting fish? Boss waved at me with a pale face. "Quick! Call the emergency!" After the terrible commotion with an ambulance, police, crowd, and screams, Boss came back in. He sat at one corner with a visibly pale face a while and told me to wrap up for the day and to have a drink with him instead.
"Our neighbor. As I told you, he lost his father and his mother is gravely ill. The business wasn't very good on top of it all, and he seemed to have made not a small debt, even from some loan sharks. The 3 months closure order might have been the last straw for him. There was his will next to him that the insurance payout should be enough to pay back the debt,
my boss said. 2 months passed. The neighboring bar was all stripped out for new refurbishment down to bare pillars. And strange things started happening around the time at my workplace. When a customer called for service at my beer hall, somebody replied, "I'll be right there," before I did. Or when clearly underage kids tried to trick me with a fake ID, the front door rattled as if somebody was trying to open it. And sometimes, as I finished cleaning up at the end of the day and turning the lights off, I saw a faint shadow of a man, weeping with his face buried in his arms. All I could do was to say quietly in my mind, hoping that he could hear me, "Here's not your bar, poor man." I stopped working there when I returned to university. When I returned there a few months later, I found it out of business too. I guess that was bound to happen. About a month after my dad's passing, his old friend unexpectedly called my mom. He said my late dad appeared in his dream the previous night and told him,
"I never had a chance to treat my poor wife with something nice. Tell her to check out the underneath of the wardrobe drawer. She would find a bank book there. Tell her to buy herself something pretty with the money there."
After the call, Mom checked out the drawer, and indeed there was a bank book with about 500,000 won, about $450 saving. I still remember how my mom cried for a long time that day, holding me in her arms. A story a fellow soldier told me during my military service. His father had 4 brothers. The youngest of the brothers suffered cerebral palsy, which rendered him difficult to speak and move. Although the brothers didn't want to take the burden of caring for the youngest, even though they were comfortably off. So my mate's father took it upon himself. Fortunately, his wife, my mate's mom, was sympathetic and did her best to take care of her brother-in-law. It was by all means not an easy task. He was often frustrated with his own situation and would often opt to temper tantrum and screams. But mate's mother remained caring towards him for years and on. One day she had a nap and had a dream. Her brother-in-law walked up to her, straight and nimble, like he didn't have cerebral palsy anymore. He was wearing a handsome suit and smiling bright. He then gave her a big formal bow and said, "I'm most grateful for you, sister. It's time I go now." "Go? But where? I haven't fed you your dinner yet either," mate's mom said. But her brother-in-law silently gave her a smile and another bow, and with that, she woke up from the dream. She sensed a foreboding and called for her son, my mate, to go and check on his uncle quickly. When my mate opened the door, his uncle was lying straight on his back, already dead, with a faint smile on his face. "6 years ago, I was 14. That summer, my bestie died. He went to a valley upstream and swept up by the much deeper and wilder water than usual after a heavy summer rain. At the time, I had a lot of troubles, both at home and at school. I suffered deep depression and insomnia, and my bestie was really the only person who understood and emotionally supported me. Having now lost him by a tragic accident, I felt I had nothing to anchor me down in this life anymore. I didn't want to suffer anymore. So, one late summer night, I twined a few wire clothes hanger and hung myself. After the initial pain, I got lightheaded, and I think I passed out. When I opened my eyes the next, I found myself on an empty field full of mist. Was I dead, I wondered? Then I heard a laughter and turned to look. There was my bestie, smiling at me.
"Oi, mate, look at yourself,"
he said. I was just so stunned to know what to respond.
"Wouldn't you have to live twice harder and more for my sake? And fulfill your dream?"
he said, and started to untangle wire hangers from my throat one by one.
"Live to the full, and let us meet again after that, all right?"
All I could do was just to nod. He playfully slapped the back of my head as he used to. And that moment, I woke up, sprawled over the floor, and around me were the untangled hangers scattered. Hey, buddy. I was too stunned at the moment to thank you, but thank you. Now I'm not so young and foolish anymore. And yeah, just as you told me, I'm going to live twice as full and fulfill my dreams for us both. And then we'll meet again, I believe. Love you and miss you. Son of a bitch. I really don't understand people who waste their time and money to visit so-called haunted hotspots. As a person who has to walk past one such a house every day on the way home, I tell you, there's no fun in seeing a ghost. When I was 6, my family moved into the current house. It was the very first time my family got a place of our own. Just a small, humble place where I shared one room with my brother, but it was better than anything else, considering we didn't have to live under the constant pressure from a landlord or rising rent anymore. My mom is easygoing and friendly, and made friends with the whole neighborhood quickly. One of them was an old lady who lived in that now abandoned house. She lived with her son and his wife, but they seemed to have totally abandoned the old lady. I couldn't know all the details, but the rumor said her son and his wife hated the old lady so much because she once took her grandson out for a picnic and lost him. It was almost a daily event to overhear they quarrel and taunt each other. The old lady seemed not even getting enough to eat, and occasionally visited and hung around at our place till late evening, essentially inviting herself to dinner. And not even a year since we moved in the neighbourhood, that old lady started suffering dementia. I still remember when she once visited my mom as usual, and then pissed herself. She still had then remnants of her old self, and was mortified, and apologized profusely when she realized what she did. Her son and daughter-in-law couldn't care less even when their mother's dementia got quickly worse. The old lady was seen aimlessly wandering around or create little uncomfortable incidents, and the concerned neighbors talked to and blamed her son, but the son didn't care and shouted back that people should mind their own business. In that sad condition, 2 years passed. The old lady aged drastically, all wrinkly and bent. She who used to love to chatter on with my mom now didn't utter a word and hardly ever left her home either. She would just sit in her room with the door to the garden and gate to the street opened. I occasionally saw her in that state as I was on my way back home, and because I was little and didn't fully understand the situation, I just ran past, scared. The old lady passed away that winter. One day she went out saying she would wait for her lost grandson. As usual, her son didn't care, and the old lady was found 2 days later at the foot of the local mountain, crouched down and frozen to death. Her son and wife moved away as soon as the funeral was over. Guess they couldn't bear the accusing eyes of the neighbors in that small town. Into their old house moved in a new family soon, and people quickly forgot about the sad history of the old lady, until the new family started complaining about weird phenomenons. They would be woken up by somebody knocking on the gate late at night. When they opened the gate, they would find a little boy there, but he would then run away in a lightning speed before they could ask anything. Then, one winter night, the family's sleep was once again disturbed by a loud banging on the gate.
Granny! Daddy! Mommy!
The wife of the family went out to the gate, and there was somebody already trying to open up the gate. "Who are you?" the shocked wife yelled at the stranger, and when the person turned around, it was an old woman glaring angrily without a word. Scared woman ran back to fetch her husband, and when they came out together, there was not a trace of the strange old woman or the boy that knocked on the gate. And since then, the family witnessed the same old woman manifesting here and there in the house. I guess some of the more nosy neighbors told the family the history of the house and the old lady, and the family quickly moved out. Since then, the house changed hands several times, but not a single family managed to stay on more than a few years. In the end, the house was left abandoned. It's amazing how quickly a house goes disrepair when nobody lives there. Even the rusty iron gate was stolen, leaving the sad state of the house bare to the view. The room facing the street, where the old lady used to sit in and looked out, now looks like a pitless dark hole when I look over as I walk by. And in that darkness, I still sometimes see her, wrapped up from head to toe with a blanket. I tried to ignore it longest time, but after seeing her one more time on my drunken way back home, I said to Mom, I think the poor old lady is still there in her old home. Mom kept silent a while and said, Just let her be. She was a gentle soul, and even now she wouldn't mean any harm. I guess the old lady is still waiting for her lost grandson, and stay on until he returns.
My mother appears in my dream too often nowadays,
Dad said at breakfast table one day. His mother, my grandma, passed away 3 years ago. She was a warm and loving character, and I only have fond memory of her. But she did leave one little mystery. At her deathbed, I and Dad were keeping her side, and the last word she uttered, like regretting an unfinished business, was, I lost the nose. Neither Dad nor I could understand what she could have meant by that, until it all unfolded. Dad is usually far from superstitious nor very spiritual, but he seemed to get pretty uneasy about Grandma keep appearing in his dreams, and in the end decided to seek a shaman. I accompanied him to a place named Cheonusa. It was the first time visiting a shaman for both of us, and I was struck by the very particular vibe there. Colorful murals and a trace of incense in the air.
Your mother sent you here, didn't she?
The old shaman said, and I was already impressed.
Yes, it's about my mother,
Dad said.
She's still suffering from the mistake she made back in the days.
Mistake? What do you mean?
I don't have anything more to say for now. Go and move her tomb to a different plot, and then come back to me.
What? Moving a tomb is no child's business. You should at least tell me why.
If you delay, it would be like killing your mother the second time,
Shaman said with a firm voice, and told us to go. As Dad said, it was no child's business to exhume and move to a different burial plot. It took days of contemplation and some serious discussions with the relatives before Dad could finally make up his mind. On the day of exhumation, while the hired hands digging Grandma's tomb, my mother and aunts cried like the day Grandma was buried the first time. Dad and Uncle too looked all grave and uneasy. When the coffin was taken out, it was Dad's job to open it up as the firstborn son of the family.
Forgive us, Mother,
said Dad, and lifted the top. Granny was all shrunken and dried up like a mummy I saw in films. I couldn't bear the sight and turned my head away. Dad and Uncle took her body out of the coffin, but Uncle dropped her again.
Be careful,
Dad shouted angrily.
No, brother, look,
Uncle said, pointing inside the coffin. Grandma's body was all wet, all over her back down to her thigh. Not only that, the bottom of the coffin was covered with black stone grits. It isn't unheard of that groundwater sometimes seeping into the coffin, even though that is considered most unfortunate. But there was no way to explain the presence of grits at the bottom of the coffin. The top was sealed tight, and the black stone was nothing like the red and brown dirt around the burial plot either. The following day, Dad returned to the shaman with me again.
"Did you move your mom's tomb all right?"
Shaman said.
Just as you said. Yes,
Dad said.
"It's not over yet. Doesn't your mother still appear in your dream? Frequently, too."
Shaman said with no hesitation, as if she knew everything already.
Yes, she does. And says the same thing time after time.
"Of the man in black, eh?"
Yes. That the man in black suit would throw stones at her back.
Those stones represent the man's nose.
What? Nose? Could that have anything to do with what she said the last? "I lost the nose" was her last word.
Shaman tusked, with her eyes seemingly getting glisten.
"So it was. She lost it,"
she said more to herself, and added,
"Where were you born?"
Me? In Yeongdam-dong in Jeju Island.
Indeed, Dad was born and grew up in Jeju Island with his mother, while his father worked in Seoul.
"That man in black is Harubang of Jeju Island,"
Shaman said. Harubang in Jeju dialect means a grandpa, an old man. By today, it usually means the local totem carved out of black basalt stone abundant on the island. Nobody exactly knows its origin and what they were made for, but usually considered as a guardian totem and a bringer of good fortune. By now, it's the indisputable mascot of Jeju Island.
But what has Harvan got to do with my mother? And the nose?
Dad asked.
"Your mother once cut off the nose of a Harubang,"
Shaman said.
What? But what for?
"It must have been while your mother was pregnant with your youngest brother. Your brother was born with a cleft lip, wasn't he?"
The shaman seemed to know the entire family history like the back of a hand.
That's true. Even though now you don't see it after he got an operation.
"Before your brother was born, your mother seeked a shaman, and the shaman told her to cut the nose of a harubang, boil it, and drink the water to save her new baby from a cleft lip."
But he was born with one nonetheless.
"Well, the shaman was a crook. The instruction didn't work, and only earned the wrath of a harubang."
By the way, Mother would appear lying on water in my dreams, and her coffin was indeed wet too.
"Of course. The angry tears of a harubang pooled into a lake."
That explained everything. The wet coffin and the mystery black grits.
"So, what do I have to do?"
Dad said.
"Take this talisman and string of beads. Put the talisman up on the ceiling and wear the beads when you go to bed."
Is that all?
"Course not. You think it's so easy to appease to decades-old wrath? The harubang should appear in your dream. Drop on your knees and beg for his forgiveness. And at the end of it, put the beads around Harabang's neck and bow him twice. That might do.
Might? You're not sure then?
How could I be sure? It's a god's business, and I'm just a person.
I see. Well, how much should I pay for the talisman and beads?
No need. Just do as I tell you.
But I heard one always has to pay for a shaman's service.
I said no need. Go now.
Shaman's voice was firm as before. Back home, Dad put the talisman next to the ceiling light and went to bed about midnight with the beads around his neck. He looked visibly tense. I myself had a hard time falling asleep in vague anticipation. Following morning, I went to see Dad first thing in the morning. Did you see Harabang in your dream?
I indeed did. At first, I found myself walking on the water, and then I saw somebody from afar. As I got closer, I could see it was a man dressed in black suit and black fedora. So, as Shaman told me, I dropped down and begged to forgive your grandma. I didn't see his lips moving, but somehow I heard his voice clearly, saying, "Not before you bring your mother's nose."
Wow, that's creepy, I said.
Frightening. Even in the dream I could feel cold sweat rolling down my back. I knew he wouldn't be persuaded, so in the end I just hung the beads around his neck and bowed twice. And Harabang sunk down under the water. By the way, let's visit the shaman again. Need to get confirmed if that's really is it. And thank her.
So we did return. But how odd. The sign of Shaman's establishment was nowhere to be seen. It was a crumbling little house in the slum-like quarter of the town. Still, it wasn't possible to lose the way when we visited it a couple of times already. After wandering around the area for a good half an hour, we went to a corner shop nearby to ask.
Don't you know a shaman's place near here called Chanusa?
Dad said.
Chanusa? You mean the mad old cow?
The shop owner said.
The landlord told her to move out, but she just stays on.
Right. Well, we saw her yesterday and can't find it today. The sign's gone too.
Really? She didn't seem to budge, saying BS like she was waiting for somebody or something. Well, good for the landlord then now.
Wait for somebody?
Somebody she was indebted to or something. How do I make a sense of the old mad cow?
In the end, we couldn't find the shaman again. Dad says he never saw her before, so I assume the person she was indebted to might have been my grandma. Who knows what was the tangled story of the two old ladies in the past. Whatever the case, the whole episode remains the most amusing mystery for me and my dad. It's not a scary story, but it's nevertheless unforgettable for me. My dad passed away when I was 13, and my mom raised me alone. I can't say I was a very good son for her. 14th November last year, I came back home late from work, emptied a can of beer and went to bed. Then I had a dream. My mom appeared, her face wet with streaming down tears. "What's wrong?" I asked. but she didn't say anything. What woke me up was the ring of my mobile. It was a nurse from the hospital my mom was staying. My mom just passed away. I rushed to the hospital, but by then, Mom was already cold. It wasn't solely unexpected. She'd been staying in hospital for 6 months by then, unconscious after a massive brain hemorrhage. But facing her untimely death was still more devastating than I ever expected. During the 3-day funeral, I asked more than a few times to see her stored in the morgue and cried over her cold body. A few days after the funeral, I had a drink with some friends after work and was on my way home. Suddenly my heart bursted with a longing for my mom. It was 6 p.m, and winter evening got already totally dark, but I just headed to the mountain where Mom's ashes was scattered. There lied my dad, and ashes of my older brother, and now my mom. What was there to fear when 3 of my dearest people were lying there? I emptied 3 bottles of soju, crying, talking to them, and crying more. And then I think I dozed off, drunk. Then I felt somebody's hand caressing my face. It was soft and warm. I opened my eyes, and there was my mom, rubbing my face and looking down on me with eyes full of sympathy. I wanted to call out, "Mom!" but what came out was a burst of crying.
"My boy, you should go home. You can't sleep here in the cold. You two don't want to go a long way, do you?"
said Mom, and urged me to get up. But I was so drunk, I couldn't even stand up. My car was about 500 meters down the mountain, and with my spinning head, I couldn't dare to take the way.
"I'll come with you. Now, hold my hand,"
Mom said, holding my hand, and strangely I felt lighter. I was still unsteady, but I felt like I was walking on the cloud, light and dreamy. And all the while, Mom's presence was so real, the warmth of her hand and her smell. When we reached my car, I couldn't hold my pee, so found a bush nearby to take a leak. When I turned back, Mom wasn't there anymore. I looked around, searching for her, but she wasn't there. Leaning against my car, I took a cigarette. Even in death, Mom was caring for me. Why didn't I do better and be a better son for her when I had a chance? Tears poured down once again. I work in the music industry, so I live with 2 other colleagues in the building with a recording studio. It's a story one of the colleagues told me. He sees ghosts, and according to him there was a ghost of the middle-aged man in our studio. He saw him the moment he first came to see the studio,
But he didn't say anything because often ghosts become a bigger nuisance when they realize that there's somebody who can see them. But when the same ghost stayed in that same corner for days on, my colleague got curious and finally asked him what he was doing.
Do you see me? And you're not scared?
Ghost said. Not really. I've seen a lot of them. It's not that you are dripping blood or your face is melting down either. Nevertheless, we're working here. Can't you move to somewhere else? Colleague said.
I'm sorry, but can't I just stay? I won't do anything else,
Ghost said. Our studio is on the basement level. Right above us is a snack bar, and the first floor is a cram school. Apparently, the ghost's daughter attended a cram school every day, and he just wanted to watch his daughter walking up the stairs to the cram school. There was no better place than our studio, according to the ghost. Rather dingy, dark, and not many people ever coming around. Huh? I didn't know ghosts are so fussy about where they can or cannot stay, Colleague said.
I'm not really supposed to stay behind. I should be moving on, so I'd better stay as inconspicuous as possible,
Ghost said. So you have a daughter, eh? What about her mother? Don't you want to see her too?
I miss her too, but she wouldn't want to see me.
When the man died, he and his wife was in the middle of acrimonious divorce procedure. Ghost was expecting she must have already moved on and found herself a new man or something. Anyway, the ghost looked harmless and his story sad, so my colleague told him in the end that he could stay around. And then one day, my colleague found the ghost not what it used to be. He had faded into a shadow. Oi, Mr. Ghost, are you still here? Colleague asked.
Yeah, but I think it's time to go. Thank you for everything.
Now faded shadow of the ghost said. So, all is well? Have no more regrets?
Well, as a matter of fact.
Apparently, he didn't see his daughter coming to cram school anymore. She probably found another cram school or something, and there was no point in staying on there when he couldn't see her anymore. He still missed his family a lot, but he feared he would be caught, by what I'm not sure, had he wandered further around in search for them. So, better just move on? My colleague took pity of him. He was not a mellow type, but after all, the ghost was the feature of the studio for months and months on. Well, there might be something I could do. Do you still remember your old address? Colleague said to the ghost. So my colleague went around based on the old address and managed to find the dead man's wife. As I said, my colleague is not mellow at all and just told us straight about the ghost guy in the studio, not caring whether she should believe it or not. Surprisingly, she took it as was and bursted into tears. She promised she could come to the studio when her daughter was back from school. And they did. Surprisingly, the ghost guy's face looked calm while his wife and daughter cried, not because they could see him, but probably sensed something nevertheless. The ghost guy said something to them, but my colleague could not understand, so just told the two women that the dead man looked so happy to see them again. Since that day, colleague could not see the ghost again. Hope he moved on as he said he would. I've never wanted to have the sixth sense, but if one could help with the ability as in his case, it probably could be a gift too.
It goes 4 or 5 years back. A friend of mine took a part-time as a deliverer for a Chinese restaurant. I and other mates often deliberately ordered something from the restaurant and teasingly welcomed the friend delivering our order.
"Oh, our very own delivery boy is here."
The season was turning to late autumn, winds blowing about fallen leaves on the street. It was about then the Chinese restaurant started getting a regular order. A woman living in the nearby apartment block, she would order a bowl of jjajangmyeon, black bean sauce noodle, and a pack of cigarette almost every evening. It's not uncommon a client asks for an extra errand when he or she ordered food to be delivered. She was such a regular that my friend just stocked up packs of cigarette ready. Whenever he delivered the order to her door, she only crack opened her door and barely put her hands out to pay, saying, "Please just leave them in front of the door." My friend never saw her face, but her voice was clear and beautiful, so he didn't suspect anything. The almost daily order continued until mid-January. Then the order started coming scarcer. Every 3 days, then 5, then no more for a few weeks. One freezing day, the woman called again and made her usual order. It was a pretty miserable day to the delivery job on a moped. My friend made a stop at a convenience store on the way and bought a hot canned coffee to put it in the jacket pocket and warm himself up a bit. When he rang the doorbell, the door opened wide. The first thing he noticed was there was no usual warm waft of air from the inside. And then how beautiful the woman was, whom he got to see face to face for the first time. Long straight hair reached her waist, and her pale complexion was punctuated with distinctive eyes, nose, and lips. "I'm very sorry, but I don't have any cash on me today, nor any cards. Could it be possible to pay later when I make a future order?" Well, she was a regular, and wasn't she ever so beautiful? Friend assured her there was no problem. He once again noticed how cold the air from her apartment felt. He handed over the still warm can of coffee to the woman.
"You should turn up the heater inside. You may catch a cold,"
Friend said to the woman.
"Oh, you are the one working outside in this weather,"
woman said.
"Don't worry about me. It's nothing for me. Anyway, enjoy your meal."
"Thank you for the coffee. Thank you for everything. Safe ride,"
she said. In the evening, he went back to collect the dish and found a noodle just left outside the door, still wrapped and untouched. He rang the door to check if that was because something was wrong with the dish, but nobody answered. He carried on knocking on the door, and an old lady came out from the next door.
"What are you doing there? That apartment is empty,"
the old lady said.
But I delivered an order just this afternoon, and she was home,"
my friend said. The old lady's face turned pale, and just went back inside without further response. My friend felt weird. On his way out, he asked the concierge,
"I wonder if you know, I delivered food earlier to number 609. I find it left untouched. Do you know the young lady living there? Has she gone out?"
The concierge's face also turned stiff.
Are you saying she was there this afternoon? He said.
Yes,
But that's not possible.
I'm sure. You know I come to deliver here almost daily. I can tell it was her.
The concierge's mouth opened, but took a few seconds before he could say anything.
That young woman passed away a couple of days ago.
Only later, Friend could stitch up the woman's story from various rumors. She was a young, kind-hearted nurse, and one day was assaulted by 2 drunken neighbors. During the struggle, a boiling pot of water fell on her, which scalded and disfigured her face and upper torso. She quitted her job and isolated herself inside ever since. With no direct family members or close friends, she lived there all alone, till she ran out of money. Water and gas cut, till eventually found dead in a freezing cold apartment. My friend says it pains his heart to think he might have been the only contact from the outworld for her in those lonely, cold last few months for her. To think he was the one she chose to say her last goodbye. When I was little, in the wardrobe of my parents, lived a man. I must have been 4 or 5, definitely before I entered primary school. My mom worked, and my dad was supposed to take care of me, but he was a gambling addict, and more often than not, he was away all day long, leaving little me behind alone home. But I didn't mind it. When I was alone home, I opened up the wardrobe and played with a man there. He didn't have a mouth, nose, or eyes, but somehow I didn't mind at all. One day, I was left home alone again, and as usual, I played with a man in the wardrobe and dozed off. What woke me up was a strange sense of chill. I opened my eyes and saw the man standing outside the wardrobe and looking down on me. He put his hand out to me, and I just followed him as he led me out of the house. He pushed me out of the gate, and before I could say anything or hold him back, he just disappeared inside. That day, Dad forgot he left the kitchen stove on, and it started a fire. The house was almost completely burned down, but I escaped without a scratch, thanks to the man in the wardrobe. I didn't see the man again. The wardrobe was reduced to charred ash in the fire. Years later, I talked about it to Mom, and Mom said the wardrobe came with a house, and she didn't know the origin of it. You may think it was all but a fantasy of a lonely, neglected boy, but I can't stop wondering who the man really was, why he was stuck in the wardrobe, and why he was so kind to me. Now it's more than 20 years ago, but I still miss him sometimes. "3 years ago, I had a girlfriend. I loved her very much, and she loved and cared for me too. About our first anniversary came my birthday. We of course had a big plan for the day, and the night before I had a hard time falling asleep with anticipations. But contrast to my excited heart, the dream I got that night was grim. In that dream, I was having a birthday celebration with a strange girl. Then burst in my girlfriend and started to slash me all over with a cake knife. It was terrifying, her cold stare and blood sputtering everywhere. Normally I would have woken up from about that point, but this dream just carried on, moving on from one nightmarish scene to the next. I forgot the details by now, but one scene I remember is girlfriend plunging her head into a boiling pot of oil. I called her as soon as I woke up. I was worried if anything had happened to her. Girlfriend assured me she was fine and consoled me a dream was just a dream. We met in the evening with some other friends and had one hacker birthday party at a bar. It was so much fun. We all laughed a lot, and even bitter soju tasted sweet. It was the happiest birthday in my life because, above all else, my girlfriend was next to me. Girlfriend stood up saying she needed to use the ladies. She looked pretty drunk, so I accompanied her. On the way, I saw a table occupied by a group of girls looking clearly too young to be allowed in a bar, and stopped to give them a look. But before I realized what was going on, I heard a terrifying scream from my girlfriend. She must have slipped and fell hard to the corner of a table. She bled from her right eye. Blood ran cold in my vein. I pressed on her eye to stop bleeding, and girlfriend was non-responsive, clearly passed out. When the ambulance came about 10 minutes later, the paramedics were frantic all around her. They shouted this and that, but I didn't understand what really happened. I still hoped that it was just a bad cut around her eye. But now in the hospital, doctors said she needed an immediate operation, that the sharp table corner must have hit her eyeball directly. My heart ached to see still unconscious girlfriend rolled into the operation theatre. Why didn't I pay more attention? I should have been holding her hand to the toilet. Report after the operation was even more grim. They couldn't save her crushed eyeball, and girlfriend lost her one eye forever. The bigger worry was she didn't seem to regain consciousness. Her mother came. I didn't know what to explain. I just wept and apologized. And her mother slapped me. A week passed, and then a month, but girlfriend was still unconscious. Her mother insisted to transfer her daughter to a bigger hospital in Seoul, but that turned out to be the final fatal blow to the already unbearably tragic story. The car on the way to the new hospital was hit by a wheel that flew out of a heavy lorry truck that was running on the next lane. It killed both my girlfriend and her mother. I just wanted to die. Looking at the photo at the funeral, I regretted everything. Why was my birthday that day? We didn't need to party so hard, did we? We were so happy together. We were so happy. Didn't we discuss how many kids we wanted? And who should be in charge of washing dishes when we get married? I felt I would never be happy again. Worried friends took me to a bar and silently filled up my glass, which I emptied one after another, till I passed out. And then I had a dream that I still cannot forget after 3 years. There she was, my girlfriend. In her hand was a scary-looking meat knife. With her one eye glaring at me, she stabbed her own right eye with a knife time after time. My heart bled, but I couldn't do anything. And then she said,
"Why did you trip me?"
I woke up. I was going nuts. The memory from the fateful night that had been buried thus far revived after the dream. My girlfriend just didn't slip. She was tripped by my feet as I turned to look at the table with the teenage girls. It was me. Girlfriend visited me in my dream every night and accused me with,
"Why did you trip me?"
After a week of that, I thought I'd rather die. Sense of guilt made my life a living hell, but I was still too much of a coward to end it all. Then I read somewhere on the internet that one could send a letter to a dead by burning it with a photo of the recipient. In any other situations, I would have just scoffed, but I was desperate then. Another night of helplessly watching my beloved stabbing her eyeball out to accuse me, and I would have gone mad. I spent the whole day writing a letter to her. I poured out my heart on a good 10-page long letter that ended with, "I am at your mercy, my love. Do whatever to me that would bring peace back to you. Whatever you give me, I will accept." I burned a letter with her photo that I'd been keeping in my wallet. She didn't come back in my dream that night. A week passed and then a month. She didn't return. My life was still a wreck. Sense of guilt never left me. I didn't eat. I didn't go out. I didn't meet anybody. When a month passed, girlfriend appeared once again in my dream. She was still holding the knife, but this time she stabbed my right eye. I woke up with a startle. That evening, a group of friends bursted in, that they could not see me just fade away like that. They dragged me out to drink. I drank a lot to drown the image of girlfriend stabbing my eye. On the way back home, I was hit by an object that flew in from somewhere. I woke up with my right eye under bandage. Turned out I was hit by a can that a passerby kicked, and sharp edge of the can ripped off the skin around my eye. It was bad enough to require an operation. Now 3 years have passed, and I never saw her again. In the summer of my 19th year, still fresh in the university, I fell hard in love with a girl. It was my first serious love. It might have been immature, but earnest and pure on my part. Sadly, she wasn't. I did all I could do for her and let my life evolve around her, but she just chewed me as much as she pleased and spat out when she got bored with me. My desperate romance barely lasted 6 months. By the following January, I was a lost soul with a broken heart. To live another day was an agony. To drown it all, I filled my lung with a copious amount of smoke and my brain with alcohol. My first trench coat, which I bought at the beginning of autumn to show off to my girl, by then got dirty, with its sleeves stiff, having wiped out so much of my tears. I didn't dare to go back home. I didn't want to show the broken me to my parents. For the first few days, I stayed in the empty rooms in the uni, but as they started refurbishment during the winter break, I couldn't stay there anymore. I stayed with the friends for a few days, but I got tired of their half-hearted sympathy, and one day just came out and wandered around. Heavy snowfall seemed to be fitting to my miserable state. When I came across a small shell of a building still under construction, I sneaked in, probably to take shelter from the winter gusts, or probably just hide away from eyes of other people. I went up to the 3rd floor and emptied a bottle I was carrying. Could I just end it all? My mind was repeating that question. My eyes caught the exposed water pipe across the ceiling. I stepped on an empty paint can and tossed my belt over the pipe. I don't think I was really meaning to do it, but the idea felt so enticing. What would it be like? Would it take long? Would it be very painful? It should hurt my parents a lot. With a belt still around my neck and my mind noisy with all sorts of thoughts, I lighted a cigarette. Then somehow my eyes looked down the street outside through the window, or more hole on the wall because it was not yet fitted with window frames. There was a lamp post, and underneath, in the spot of the light, was a woman. She was white. Her hair, face, clothes, all white. Next to the bags of garbage and spent coal piled under the lamppost, she looked like an unexpected blossom that flowered in a mud pit. There definitely was a significant distance between us, but somehow her face looked so clear to me, as if she was looking at me from right in front of me. To my mind, her sad, enigmatic smile was telling me clearly,
"Don't do it. Don't."
Then I thought, the white face looked somehow familiar. Where did I see her before?
I jumped down from the paint can and ran down to the street. But under the lamp was the white woman no more. There wasn't even any footprints on the snow that covered all around. About 3 years passed. By then I finished the military service, and the pang of the broken heart was also dulled down, if not completely healed over. One evening, I was watching TV with my mom. There was a report about a rare genetic syndrome called albinism, that the body doesn't produce any pigment. They interviewed an albino, and she was indeed all white, the hair, face, everything.
She reminds me of poor Young-suk,
Mom said. Who is Young-suk? I said. Young-suk was our neighbor when I was about 2 years old. She was about 30, and at the time she would have been already considered an old maiden, but she couldn't get married because she was an albino, with white hair and white face. I forgot it all, but apparently Young-suk adored little me.
"Wouldn't I love to have such a cute child of my own?"
she would say every time she saw me. She did manage to get herself a boyfriend and gave him her all, but her man only used and robbed her of all she had and dumped her. One cold winter day, she was found
hung at her place, using her belt. I felt as if my head was hit hard when Mom recounted this story. I didn't remember Young-suk, but somehow I knew it was her that I saw in that cold winter day. It was her who stopped me from committing something foolish. How I wish she appears to me one more time, so that I could thank her. Last autumn, I got a part-time work at a PC방 or an internet cafe. Doing the midnight shift was exhausting, but at least it was usually very quiet. One late night, a client came, a young man clad in a thick winter jacket, complete with a woolen scarf and even a face mask. It was still early autumn, and such a midwinter attire was very odd. But whatever. I heard one gets to meet all sorts of wacky and weird when one works in a service industry, and I anyway couldn't care less when I felt all drowsy and tired. I showed him to his seat and brought him the customary ashtray too. The man's eyes got narrower looking at me. The rest of the face was hidden behind his mask, but I could tell he was smiling at me. I felt a bit weird. Was he measuring me or what? But what was I but a part-timer? I just quietly came back to my desk. Then I realized something and got a little chill. At the entry of the internet cafe was a motion detecting bell. It was to alert me whenever a customer came in. But just now, it didn't ring when the weird guy came in, did it? But whatever. I just shrugged. 2 hours later, the man came to pay. His eyes got narrow again, looking at me.
Be good,
he said casually. What was this guy? Was he flirting with me? But once again, I just mumbled, thank you. A couple of days later, I was just idling in my room, dreading yet another night shift later. I got a call from my boss, the owner of the internet cafe.
Hey, come to the cafe now,
he said. Excuse me? My shift doesn't start until later, I said.
Just come,
boss said and hung up. Effing boss. Or did I do something wrong? I went to the internet cafe, dreading the worst.
Are you a sleepwalker?
Boss bluntly said. What? No?
Look at this,
boss said and played a record of the surveillance camera. It was from the 2 nights ago. Nobody came in, but I seemed still standing up to greet, showing a seat and even bringing an ashtray to the desk. I was baffled. I did see that guy clad in winter gears. He even talked to me, didn't he? I was creeped out so much that I gave my notice. A few days passed. I got a call. It was from Taeyang, who was the closest friend from high school. Though, since I moved to a different region for my uni, we rarely met. Hey, Taeyang, my boy, what's up? I said.
Hello? This is Taeyang's mom,
the lady said on the other end of the line. Oh, excuse me, ma'am. How are you doing?
I'm calling because Taeyang is dead.
I didn't know what to say or how to take the news.
It's already a few months ago, actually. Taeyong took a part-time as a deliverer during the winter vacation and had an accident. I should have contacted his friends earlier, but I was so shocked and devastated then, so it took some time.
Taeyong's mom said. I don't know why, but I suddenly reminded myself of that mystery client to the internet cafe. All I could see was his eyes, but yes, those eyes. Why didn't I recognize them earlier? And that casual, "Be good." That was what my friend used to tell me. Following weekend, I visited the sanitarium where Taeyong rested. I also resumed working at the internet cafe. After all, I could see my friend because of the job. Hey, Taeyong, my friend. Not sure what is being good, but I'm trying. Won't you visit the internet cafe sometime again? I would welcome you more warmly then.